Whatever your child needs, you'll be right by his side. So isn't it good to know that the Children's Hospital, ranked best in the nation by U.S. News & World Report and Parents Magazine, is right by your side? The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Visit chop.edu/yourside.
Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Yet another great show. We're going to be speaking with L.A. Marzulli about a couple of different topics, in particular the Nephilim, and then also about the end of times, the end of days, however you want to phrase that. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And if you haven't been to the Just Energy Radio webpage lately, please do stop by. We've been making a bunch of changes. Stop by, see what we got going on, adding a lot of new content. And we would like for you to be part of the change and transition. Well, let me tell you a little, maybe a lot about LA, and we'll get him on the air. L.A. Marzulli delves into the physical evidence of the Nephilim, the giants of Old Testament law. He has a significant cover-up taken place over the years, reducing these double-digit gigantic hybrids into the dustbins of history. He will provide evidence of this genetic abomination, the product of the breeding of heavenly angels with the women of earth during the days of Noah. These ancient builders left behind the evidence of their supernatural strength and technological know-how. Their massive megalithic structures are legendary, and evidence of Nephilim architecture abound worldwide. Marzulli and a team of scientists, archaeologists, and scholars traveled to the jungles of a foreign land, perhaps the only place where they could gain access to the unspoiled evidence of this genetic manipulation. So please welcome the author of On the Trail of the Nephilims, and also we're going to be talking about his new movie, Watchers 9, Days of Chaos, L.A. Marzulli. Hey, L.A.
Hey, Dr. Rita, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I am just looking forward to talking to you. You know, I've only heard like really excellent things about you, and then I was checking out some of your videos, and I'm going, oh, man, we might have a laugh fest. I don't know.
That's always good.
I love laugh fest. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, let's start talking about the Nephilim and what got you on their trail. What provoked your interest in that whole topic?
Well, I think that the history of the world that we've been, taught in our school system is basically a joke. There's something that happened in the far distant past, and it's global, and evidence of it is everywhere. And that has piqued my interest for the last 25 years. I'm reading about the giants that we read about, of course, in the biblical prophetic narrative, but it's also in other books, like Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, talks about the Nephilim being openly displayed at the time of his writing in the first century. And he says, and I quote, these giants, these entities, these beings had countenances so large and so different from any other man that they were fearful to the sight. And when they would yell or scream, it was thunderous. I mean, people would just shrivel in their presence, according to Josephus. When you start reading that, you go, well, there's something going on here. Why would the Israelites had the bones on display to show everyone what was in the land when their forefathers conquered it about 3,500 years ago? So, I mean, that's sort of a nexus of it, reading about it and wondering, well, is this really true? Did it really happen? The book that changed my life was a book by Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, who later became my mentor. He passed away in 2013. The book is called The Omega Conspiracy, and that book literally connected dots that I had never even imagined were there. I didn't even know the dots were there. And then he showed me the dots, and then he connected them. So it was absolutely incredible, life-changing. I received my honorary doctorate from Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. That book started, his book became a nexus for the Nephilim trilogy. There are 3 books in that. It's about, I guess, 850, 900 pages worth of, rip-roaring fiction. But from the fiction, that branched out into other books. And then, of course, culminating in the last 2, On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And that is, let's get off the computer and get out into the field. Let's look at the research. Let's go to some of these places. Let's see what there is to see. Boots on the ground type stuff. Wind in the hair. Smell what I'm smelling at Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo, sites that I've been to, or Teotihuacan in Mexico, or where I was just last week, the Great Circle Mountain in Ohio. And all these sites, in my opinion, bear the fingerprints of otherworldly entities, and we'll just leave it at that.
Well, okay. I think the place most people hear the word Nephilim, is connected to the Genesis 6. In those days, the Nephilim walked the earth. What's your take? Because I think we have a little disagreement here, and I think you would be the best person to have a little debate on this topic. But what's your take on the whole Nephilim thing, associated with the Genesis 6 idea?
Well, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go. These entities that came to Earth are extraterrestrial because they don't reside here. Therefore, in the classic definition of the word, they are extraterrestrial. The only place we differ as to really their origins, where are they from? And I hold to Jacques Vallée, J. Allen Hynek's position that these are interdimensional beings. So that's the position that I, lean towards, and I'm in good company. I mean, Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek, I mean, these are sort of the forefathers or the founding fathers of modern ufology in a way. So these entities are extraterrestrial. They're interdimensional beings, entities. I believe that the ones that fall to Earth, that came to Earth thousands of years ago, extremely intelligent, but highly malevolent, and they have an agenda. Interestingly enough, fast forward into modernity, David Jacobs' book, and I've interviewed him several times.
I have him on my question list, but go ahead.
There you go. Well, I mean, and I understand why. I mean, this stuff is bizarre, but here's the deal. And we're already in fast forward, but I mean, I've got people that have emailed me, and a couple of these people, one of them in particular, I know this man really well. I spent time with him. We've broken bread together. I mean, I know this guy, and he had an encounter which can only be some sort of a hybrid entity. He was out for a walk in a park, and he saw this woman running towards him. She was very tall, about 6'3", 6'4", and that's nothing unusual, but it is a little striking. I mean, the woman was very athletic. Again, there's nothing unusual about that, but he was kind of like, okay, what am I looking at here? She had striking whitish blondish hair. And as she approached him, he started to feel uneasy and he wasn't sure why. Well, he went into a sort of a offensive position mentally and began to just, position himself. And the woman's eyes were pale blue. And as she got closer to him, the eyes switched from pale blue to solid black. At this point, he was now in a warfare mode and began to move against it, not physically, but in another way. He began to move against it. And as this woman ran by him, I don't know how, she wasn't, like a foot away. She was, there was space between them. She turned her head, eyes were jet black, turned her head, bared her teeth, and growled at him. So, what was that, a hybrid being? I don't know. Was it a human being? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and neither did the man. His name is Mike. That had the encounter. He was definitely visibly shaken from it. And I mean, that's just some of the stuff that comes across my desk. So, Jacob's talking about some sort of breeding program going on by these intruders, entities coming in. We've done a lot of research on this. In fact, Watchers 7, which won the EBE Film Award and People's Choice Award in 2014, we were with the late Dr. Roger Lear, and Roger was in all of our Watchers series from 1 to 8. We dedicated 8 to him. He passed away, but I remember when I got into this like 15 years ago, and I met Roger for the first time, and I had heard about that he had extracted an implant, and I was curious, and only like Roger can do, he goes, well, you want to take a look at it? And he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a vial, wiggles the vial in front of me, and then I hold out my hand, and the next thing I know, I'm holding an implant, a piece of metal.
Cool.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So, fast forward to 2014, there was this man by the name of Bill, not his real name, who claimed to have been abducted when he was 5 years old. He fought them off the first time, and the second time he wasn't so fortunate. They went right up through the ceiling, and you and I both know that that's physically impossible. So these entities, whoever they are, have the ability to manipulate time, space, matter, and energy in ways that we don't understand. It's beyond anything we know or can even deal with. It's a different type of physics. And what's interesting is in the biblical prophetic narrative, we see the same type of manipulation by these other intruders, but these intruders that show up apparently are benevolent. I'm being
I think it's the spin, but we can come back to that.
Okay, and it may be. Who knows? I wasn't there, so I can only look at the written account and go, isn't that interesting? But the bottom line is, we'd all heard about the implants, and I was laughed, and scorned about it, and people chose that this is all just nonsense. It's not happening. Well, then we had Bill, and it's all on film, and we documented everything. And what was interesting about this, we had it on a Gauss meter. So this little implant below a guy's leg is giving off a magnetic field of about 8.0 to 8.5 milligauss. How's that possible? It shows up on the X-ray. It shows up on CAT scan. It's giving off a radio frequency at 330 hertz. What the heck is that about? And we don't know. And so the day comes to take it out. And let me backtrack. 2 weeks before the operation, we went to the surgeon. And he had the X-ray, took a look at it, made a little black mark with a magic marker on the guy's leg, took the ultrasound. Within 2 minutes, he found the thing. So now it's the day of the extraction. We're going to take this thing out. I'm figuring it's going to take 20 or 30 minutes. We'll go to an early lunch, wrap it up. We have 3 film crews that are there. Dr. Roger Lear is assisting. Dr. Matriciana is the lead surgeon.
I saw that film.
There you go. That's ours. And what was amazing, and this is where I get into the whole spiritual warfare thing, okay? We couldn't find the implant. It wasn't there. It was like it was being cloaked. He went over a 3-inch by 8-inch strip of flesh for an hour and 20 minutes. Couldn't find it. The Gauss meter showed nothing. The stud finder went out all over the guy's body. It was like we were being screwed with. We were, in my opinion, by intruders that were invisible. I get a little tap on the shoulder, and I took authority over the situation, and I just said this. I said, if there are forces that are cloaking this device, I ask that you would break their power and do it soon. What's astounding about this is in less than 2 minutes on the ultrasound, the implant comes up from the back of the image, from the background. It floats to the front and everybody goes, oh my gosh, what's that? It was astounding. And that's how, and later on we took the thing out. So those encounters are very interesting. We were I believe that implant was being deliberately cloaked. The powers that put it there to begin with did not want us to take it out. And I've done follow-up with the patient. He lost 20 pounds within the first 6 months, which was really interesting, without diet or exercise. And there's some other anomalies with his physiology, which I won't get into. So something's going on here. We all agree something's going on.
Well, and you brought up David Jacobs. I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and he was telling his stories, and I read his book, which was really interesting. And one of the things that he talks about, or his people talk about, is they felt like they were being watched, or this person was here to watch. And, what struck me in my mind, it's like, so were they the watchers that we hear like from the Book of Enoch? And I was like,
there you go.
There you
go.
I don't think those people would have made that connection by themselves. But I think you and I would, because that's just kind of our thing.
Well, and I agree with you. I think that the watchers that we read about in the Book of Enoch are still here. In my understanding of the cosmos, there is a cosmic war which is raging in an unseen dimension. I've written about this extensively in the book, The Cosmic Chess Match. We are under siege, literally, have been for millennia here. There are dark supernatural forces, unfortunately, that do stuff on this planet that just makes no sense at all. There are occultists. I'll just say one, whom we all know, Adolf Hitler, who was an occult adept who took on the dark side. And, 50 million people were killed in World War II. 15 million perished in the death camps. And what most people don't understand, this was deliberate. I mean, these guys knew exactly what they were doing. And that's a 3-hour conversation. But the bottom line is most people don't understand that in the Third Reich, in Hitler's Germany, there were 20,000 camps all connected, holding camps, processing camps, death camps, crematoriums, slave camps, work camps. I mean, 20,000. So when we get the number that Benjamin Netanyahu talks about, 6 million, it actually may be conservative. We actually don't know how many perished in the ovens of Germany. But the word Holocaust means a sacrifice, a burnt sacrifice on an altar. And that's exactly what it was. They were adepts. And what's interesting is when we go back to the biblical prophetic narrative, we find the same exact type of burnt offerings, as it were, taking place thousands of years ago to Shemosh, to Baal, and to other ancient so-called gods with little g's. So I think, in my opinion, Dr. Rita, there's a connectivity here.
I agree. Getting back to the Nephilim.
Oh, yes.
the old Nephilim, not the today stuff.
Are we having fun yet?
Yes, I am. Why do you think most people assume that the Nephilim were the product of the sons of God and the daughters of men?
Well, again, we have two choices. We can either look at the Tanakh and understand that these ancient manuscripts, which are also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, by the way, and that's why I'm sort of backtracking here, but the Dome of the Book in Israel shows the entire scroll of Isaiah, which was written a little over 2,000 years ago, and yet we see that the Hebrew is. You can read it. If you can read the Hebrew today, you can read the Isaiah scroll, and nothing has changed. So the scribes were very, very, and again, this is like a very in-depth conversation, but the scribes were beyond meticulous to a fault. If there was, they're writing everything on parchment. Usually it was lamb, okay? So they're writing on parchment. If there's one mistake, that's it. Not only is that parchment tossed out. It is burned. That's how insane this thing was. I mean, that's how
they're still like that today. If they're doing a Torah scroll.
Exactly. That's my point. So when we read, I've established the fact that this stuff isn't just, that the people, the scribes that are doing this, they're just not adding things or taking things out.
Then let me just tell you my contention, because this is where I get a lot of crap from people, and I would like to have this discussion with you. And so my position is, from my research, is that the Nephilim were giants. I think we both agree on that point.
Sure.
And I agree that there were the Watchers, these extraterrestrial beings. I agree on that point. Where I get hung up is that the Nephilim are the offspring, because if you read a lot of mythological stuff, there is a consistent story of giants walking the earth prior to the creation of man. And so if you read that statement with a different twist, in those days, the Nephilim walked the earth, then it would be like, check, yes, in those days, the giants walked the earth. And then the sons of God is mated with the daughters of men. So how can you have giants mate giants? You know what you see where I'm going with that?
Well, I hear what you're saying, but what we know, again, let me go back to the Genesis account. We know from Genesis 3 that there's only a few people in that scenario, according to the ancient text, okay? You got the God of the Bible, you got Adam and Eve, you got the serpent. That's it. And there's a mandate that comes down from the God of the Bible, who says the seed of a serpent will be at enmity with the seed of the woman. That's what it says. The seed of the serpent will be at enmity, at war with the seed of the woman. 3 chapters later, in Genesis 6, we see the full-blown manifestation of the seed of the serpent with the Nephilim walking the earth in those days. And look, and here's the deal. Nobody on this planet has all the answers. I don't have all the answers. We see through, everything very, very dimly. We're not sure of the particulars. I mean, why is this serpent guy showing up doing this stuff to begin with? Why the judgment? Why the mandate? And then what's really bizarre is, and this is what people don't understand, it's like, according to the Genesis 6 account, Noah is not contaminated, but apparently everybody else on the planet is in some way contaminated with different DNA. And don't ask me how that works, but because everybody gets wiped out according to the biblical narrative. That's nuts. I mean, that's like, wait a minute, what are we looking at here? So something traumatic and unprecedented is happening in antiquity that, we still really don't know the particulars. And frankly, Genesis just gives it like one chapter. I mean, we get this flood thing and the waters of the deep open up, and I get it. What's interesting is right after that, this character shows up, Nimrod, on the scene, and he starts building Babel, to tower to heaven. Well, what the heck is that? They know they can't get to heaven. What they're trying to do, it's a ziggurat. It's a high place. And by rituals, they're trying to open up the gateways and the portals to allow these entities to come back in, because there's power there. And there's also something interesting in that passage, that narrative, which states they used brick instead of stone, which is, to me, that's just screaming at me. Because when you go to Sacsayhuaman in Peru, it's all stone. It's all megalithic, 120-ton stones that are joined with andesite stone, joined meticulously together. You can't do it. You can't duplicate this in modernity. I mean, I've taken it to stonemasons. You can't, with cranes and diamond saws and everything else. And here's the deal. And I know you know this. Because I know you've interviewed my friend Brian Forrester. Brian took us there. I'm just sitting there with my jaw on the ground. There's no way to do this in antiquity, in the Neolithic, 3,500 years ago, with copper chisels. Are you kidding me? How did they move the stones? And the stones are taken from a quarry 40 miles away. And I talked to Brian about this. It's basically a goat trail. Even today in modernity, you can only arrive at the quarry on horseback. It's like, wait a minute. And there's no beasts of burdens there. I mean, they've got no elephants or anything like this. How did they move the stones? And of course, no one knows. So I look at that and I call that fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. I would posit that Sacsayhuaman was destroyed, but there's vestiges of it. What remains of it, I think that site is pre-flood. Now, that's my hypothesis.
Oh, I agree.
That's my hypothesis.
I think all of the megalithic stuff we see around the world is way older, more than 5,000 years, 6,000 years.
I agree.
And I even wonder if the 12,000 years, 12,000 BC, 11,000 BC is even a realistic date, and if it doesn't need to get pushed back even further than that.
I don't know. And that's what drives all of us nuts. I mean, there's no way to really tell. I mean, carbon-14, I trust up to about 2,000 or 3,000 years, and then after that, it just goes screwy. But I've done carbon-14 dating on some of the Paracas elongated skulls. I've done carbon-14 dating on charcoal that we found from a burial site in an undisclosed location in Ohio, which was 2,000 years old, and the mummy wrappings that we took from Senior Juan's museum, just a little size of a postage stamp, that was carbon-14 dated at 2,000 years old. So I trust that. When it starts going, after like 4,000 or 5,000 years, it's like, when you talk to some academics, they will say the same thing. But I agree with you. We don't know how far back it goes, but it's very recent. It's not like millions and millions of years. It's very, very recent. And then something cataclysmic happens. Like when you go to Tiwanaku, it's just like, what's this? What am I looking at? What happened here? It's like, wait a second, something cataclysmic. There was an event, Ollantaytambo in Peru. Same thing. It's like, whoa. This wasn't a temple. It looks like it was part of some sort of stone machine. We don't know what it did, but I mean, we think it had moving parts. I mean, there's so much that we just don't know and it's beyond the scope of us. Look, when you go to Tiwanaku, let's say, or Pumapunku, you can't put it back together because the morons who built the railroad took many of the stones and ground them, crushed them and used it for gravel to make the railroad. It's like, I'm not making this stuff up. It's like you want to scream. And in Pumapunku, in the square, they have a table that's there. We show this, I've got film of it. I don't think we showed it in one of our watches, but I filmed it. Brian and I go walking over to the table, and it's this beautiful stone table. Guess where they got the stone from? Pumapunku. Some moron, dragged it off, and now it's, in the town square. And we were there, and this thing was some complex machine, and we have no idea what it was. None, because you can't put it back together. But something violent happened there. Something really violent happened and blew this thing away. So, in some ways, we have more questions than we do answers.
And a giant wall to beat down to get to them. So we have a question from the chat room, which kind of fits in with what we're talking about. And he wants to know if there's been any, this is from Neutron, if there's been any DNA testing on the elongated skulls. And I've had Brian on, and every time I have him on, it's always like, well, we didn't get the results. And it's like, Brian, no. So I actually have not heard the results. And I know that they were supposed to get some.
Greetings, Neutron. Thanks for listening. I just have to do that. Sorry. But look, the whole thing with the DNA, and I'm involved in this. Brian and I are kind of involved in it together. We've got preliminary stuff, which Brian posted and I posted on the blog, which created a firestorm. Frankly, it shouldn't have created a firestorm because it's just a very small sample that was taken out by Lloyd Pye. No one took skulls out. Someone took a small bone sample or a tooth. Now,
because you didn't get permission and
but that's
nightmare.
Here's the deal. We've spoken to archaeologists in Peru, and apparently, for DNA samples, nobody really cares. We're not raiding antiquities. We're taking a very small sample, and we're sharing the information. Now, the late Lloyd Pye took those samples out, according to what I was told. The preliminary mitochondrial DNA came back. It was not human. Homo sapiens sapien was not Neanderthal, was not Denisovan. So what are we looking at? There's an artifact that we had access to here in the States in a private collection that came out of Peru. It's a greatly elongated skull. I've seen it. We've took DNA samples from it. I can't tell you anything about that yet. I can only tell you this. that we are more perplexed now than we were before we did any of the testing. We have no idea what we're looking at, and we are attempting to get and hook up with archaeologists and museums in Peru. We've got 2 labs here that we're working with, DNA labs, ancient DNA labs, paleo DNA labs. We're ready to roll the dice and see where all this goes. We've got nothing that I can bring to you at the moment. There's just we just don't have the results. So, like I said, in some ways we're further away now, even with the samples that we took from the one greatly elongated skull in a private museum than we were before we started. And that's why we're on the trail. That's why we're proceeding very slowly, cautiously. And if we have something, we will hold a press conference and release to the world what our findings are. And then other people can, try to corroborate those findings or tell us we're all crazy, whatever.
So do you think that the skulls that, we've had Brian on the show talking about, the ones without the sagittal plate and, the extra holes and the weird teeth are potentially evidence of these Nephilim?
Let me tell you what my hypothesis is. We know that 3,500 years ago, the Israelites, and this goes back to the God of the Bible. It's all right there. And about 3,500 years ago, Moses and the crew leave Egypt. And remember, what's interesting here is, and this is the topic of a book I'm working on, when Moses shows up, there's a full-blown occult paradigm already in operation, completely full-blown. And the text for that is Moses throws down his staff and it becomes a serpent. Well, the Egyptians who are part of Pharaoh's court, they just kind of laugh and they throw their staves down and they become serpents. So something's going on here. There's a full-blown occult paradigm already in operation when Moses and Aaron show up. Most of us know the story, the whole Exodus thing, Cecil B. DeMille. A lot of it is a lot of liberty, but there's something going on here. And in fact, after the 3rd plague with the Egyptian magicians can't duplicate it, they go, hey, Pharaoh, this is the real God, better listen up. So they leave the scene and we don't see them again. So Moses and Aaron finally, let my people go. They get everybody out. There's probably 3 million people. And they go up to what is known as the Promised Land. And I've written about this in the Cosmic Chess Match because in part of the ancient biblical text, specifically in the book of Numbers, it talks about that when Moses sends the 12 spies to go in, the spies come back and they go, oh my gosh, we were like grasshoppers in their sights. We saw the Nephilim there. That's what they say. That's a direct quote. We saw the Nephilim there and we were like grasshoppers in their sights. The people freak out. They basically run. They won't go in. That generation is then cursed. And that's a 3-hour conversation, why that's going on. It happens on the 9th of Av. The 9th of Av is a day of calamity for the Jewish people, has been for millennia, and continues to be so. For instance, the first temple in Jerusalem was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The second temple in AD 70 was destroyed by the Romans on the 9th of Av. The Jews were expelled from Spain and England on the 9th of Av. The Holocaust began on the 9th of Av. They pulled out from Gaza just recently on the day after the 9th of Av. So I always track where the 9th of Av is because the Hebrew calendar is different than the Gregorian calendar. So it floats every year. It can go further into, let's say, August, or it can come back into July. So I always check and watch Israel because of the prophecies surrounding Israel that, in my opinion, are being fulfilled even as we speak, that are thousands of years old, but I digress. I always keep a real close eye on the 9th of Av. So that generation, 40 years, perishes. The next generation comes back up and they go into the Promised Land. There is a mandate that is given, which, again, is really bizarre, and it's genocide, unless there's something else going on here. And this gets into the whole cosmic chess match, because it gets into the breeding program, this gets into the Nephilim, and I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is that the Nephilim are there. And as Joshua and Caleb go in to what's known as the Promised Land, the Levant, they begin to wipe these Nephilim tribes out. Our hypothesis is, if that's true, is it possible that these tribes began to flee the area? And if so, did they leave vestiges of their fleeing? And lo and behold, so far, my research has turned up that the Paracas people are about 3,500 years old. They show up on the shores of Peru in Paracas about 3,500 years ago. That fits the timeline perfectly, but wait, it gets better. Over here in the Americas, specifically in the Ohio Valley, we find these people that show up around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago, again, fitting the timeline. Elongated skulls have been found in burial chambers around Stonehenge. Most people don't know that. That's the work of Maria Wheatley. My hat is off to her. She's
great.
She's great. She's done some great work. What she doesn't know, and this is what's interesting, and this is, thank God for Brian Forrester. He took us to a place called Camacho, which is an area where a lot of tombs are raided by the Huacaros, the grave robbers. It's a very weird place. And we climbed this hill, which was a high place, and there was a killing zone there. It was a killing field. These people were killed. There's no, it's a mass grave. There's no funerary objects anywhere. It's a jumbled pile of bones in a shallow grave. And every skull that we saw, almost without doubt, had blunt force trauma to the left side of the head, which meant that someone holding a war club smacked a person, and that person was killed. Interestingly enough, thousands of miles away, buried in Stonehenge, elongated skulls, they show the same identical blunt force trauma, a blow to the side of the head. And I find, again, there's a connectivity between the sites. Something is going on here. Now, that's only one. The elongated skulls are just, let's say, look, the Nephilim tribes have different names: the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Nephilim, the Zanzumim, the Emims, and seemingly many of the tribes have different genetic characteristics. So elongated skulls might be one genetic characteristics, but get this. When I was in Catalina, and I discovered this, and the Vieira brothers took this information, and I was on their season finale on the History Channel, and this year, in fact. And what was interesting about that, I discovered 3 photographs, actually 4, in the archives that were already cataloged, already in manila folders and museum boxes, which had been overlooked by other archaeologists and anthropologists, or by archaeologists and anthropologists. But I went in looking for 6 fingers, elongated skulls, and evidence of giants. We found 2 9-footers there. One of the 9-footers had 6 fingers. We found greatly elongated skulls. And then we found one skull that reminded us very much of a very enigmatic artifact that Brian showed us in Peru by the name of Waikiki. And DNA testing was done on that, apparently, by a British film crew, which showed that the mitochondrial DNA came back as human, but the nuclear DNA, which comes from the father's side, came back undetermined, unknown. So we found evidence of all that. And what's interesting is, when you go out to the Catalina Museum, the picture that I discovered that was back in the archives, stuck in some folder someplace in a museum box, all right, never to see the light of day again, has now been blown up, except that photograph, the original, shows Ralph Glidden, who was a primitive archaeologist hired by the High Museum to conduct basically archaeological digs in and around the Catalina Island, the Channel Islands, which go from Santa Barbara off the coast of California down to San Diego. And he combed these islands, and in some ways he was a little more than a grave robber. I get it. But he also took some pictures, and these pictures are what we were after. And sure enough, there's a shot with Glidden standing in a recently excavated tomb, and in front of him is a very large guy. That's the picture that we had analyzed. That shows the giant is about 9 feet tall. Now that's authentic. I had 3 different researchers look at that. There was no collusion between the researchers. They all took it, the photograph, they digitized the photograph, they put it in computer, and they were able to ascertain, all of them No collusion between the three researchers, all put it at 9 feet. So what are we doing with a 9-footer out on Catalina? And once again, it goes back to our hypothesis that these ancient Nephilim tribes, along with their technology and knowledge, fled the area. And the vestiges of it are worldwide.
And so you don't think that there was possibly a worldwide, I'm going to say, colony or population of these giants that just lived, I mean, like there are humans everywhere on the earth. You don't think that there were giants around the earth, that had different genetic traits?
I agree with you. I think there were giants around the earth that had different genetic traits. I think some of the giants, though, there was a diaspora. They fled the Levant. And that goes back 3,500 years ago. Between 3,000 and 3,500 years ago is when all this migration begins to happen. It's when the Paracas people show up. It's when the so-called Hopewell people show up in Ohio. So everything fits the timeline. And then we get other sites like Teotihuacan. If you've never been to that site, it's jaw-dropping. It's not megalithic in the sense that we're not looking at the same type of stonework that we see down at Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo. It's different. It's different. And humans built it. I have no doubt about that. But here's where it gets weird. There's another place, and Brian Forrester took us there, called Corral. It's the oldest city in the Americas, both North, Central, and South America. And the moment I got there, and it's out, first of all, when you get there, it's about 3 miles north of Lima. You get there, and it's in this beautiful, hidden, verdant valley with this river flowing through it. Striking, breathtakingly beautiful. And all around it are verdant fields of different crops because it's a continual growing cycle there. And then we moved away from the river up onto this plateau. And there on this plateau are a series of pyramids, okay? And archaeologists have a way of naming, oh, there's the pyramid of the sun, oh, here's the pyramid of the moon. No one knows what these things were called. Let's be intellectually honest here, okay? No one knows what the people that built them actually called them. If you want to call it that, that's fine. I don't care. But they're there, and their remains are there. Well, what's interesting about this, just like Teotihuacan in Mexico.
Big pyramids,
Big pyramids, like not as big as Teotihuacan, but big pyramids, yes.
Okay.
And what's interesting is there's no pre-existing culture in the Corral area. Nothing. This thing just comes up from the floor of this plateau, and we're looking at advanced mathematics, geometry. We're looking at a knowledge of the precession, of the solar precession, of a lunar precession, of the sun, the equinoxes, the solstices. We're looking at alignments. We're looking at building techniques, architectural techniques. Are you kidding me? I mean, the degree of technology that's employed 5,000 years ago is unbelievable. And the same thing, when I got there, the first words out of my mouth to the guide was, oh my gosh, this looks just like Teotihuacan. And he goes, yes, but it's much older. And I just said, yeah, but has anyone looked into the similarities between the sites? Because there are huge similarities between the sites, except Teotihuacan is much newer than Corral. But same thing, when you go to Teotihuacan, you stand there and look at the Pyramid of the Sun. And it's like, it begs the question, wait a minute, who gets up on a Monday morning and decides to build something like this? And where does the technology come from? I mean, there's no pre-existing culture. Again, advanced mathematics. I mean, you just don't start something like this without someone new.
Some kind of a primer.
Bingo. And this is where, for me, it's extraterrestrial activity. We've already been through that discussion. So when I'm using that word, okay, for me, it's interchangeable with interdimensional entities, but they are not from here. So in the classic sense, they are extraterrestrial, and I'm not trying to be cute here. Anything that's off planet, whether it's interdimensional or from, Zeta Reticuli someplace, it's extraterrestrial. So that's what I'm talking about. Knowledge is being dispensed. Knowledge is coming here from somewhere else, and these people are given that knowledge. What's interesting is this is exactly what we read about in the Book of Enoch.
I always joke around and say humans are just stupid because the gods gave us everything because we didn't invent anything. But anyway, I mean, the part that I find very sad is there's all of this material that's been coming out about, the sites in South America. I think Brian has done a great job of creating visibility for what's going on down there. And there has been zero interest from the mainstream community to go down there and really do anything to preserve anything. And I think it's just wasted. It's like, okay, we can find a new little piece of ceramic in Egypt or whatever, or we could explore this undiscovered country and find all of this stuff that hasn't been touched for thousands of years, probably.
It is unbelievable. I want to tell you a story.
Whatever your child needs, you'll be right by his side. So isn't it good to know that the Children's Hospital, ranked best in the nation by U.S. News and World Report and Parents Magazine, is right by your side? The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Visit chop.edu/yourside.
Okay. I had a forensic anthropologist lined up and ready to come down to Peru, to Camacho, to that killing zone. Forensic anthropologist. This is a forensic anthropologist's dream. Are you kidding me? Multiple skulls, multiple killings. It's a killing field. I mean, he could spend 10, 15 years on that site, digging that site. And I said, look, come down. I'll pay you $1,000 stipend for the week, pay for your airfare, bring you down here, show you the whole thing. You write a report. He was all set to go. He was excited about it. And about a week or two before I needed a commitment, a firm commitment, because we were planning the trip, he calls me up and he goes, I can't do it. And I go, why? So we have a face-to-face lunch, and he leans over the table and he whispers and he says, if I get involved in this, I can lose my credibility with my colleagues. I'm not making that up. And I just went, okay. And that's the problem in academia. Everyone walks. Look, if you don't take my word for this, okay? For those of you in the chat room, watch Ben Stein's movie Expelled. That's all I ask you to do. Just watch Ben Stein's movie Expelled, and you will see the intellectual fascism that permeates both the scientific community and academia. It's fascism. It's intellectual fascism. If you think outside the box, and Ben Stein, I don't need to make the movie because Stein already has, and it's brilliant. He does a brilliant job. He sits down with Richard Dawkins, one of the foremost evolutionists of the 20th and 21st century, and just asks a very simple question: where did life begin? And Dawkins says, well, no one knows. And so Stein goes, well, how do you think it began? Well, I told you, no one knows. And so Stein throws him, and Dawkins says, well, it began with the first self-replicating molecule. And Stein goes, well, how did that happen? And Dawkins goes, no one knows, nobody. And he goes, well, you don't know either. No one knows. Okay, we get that. And then Stein throws him an intellectual lifeline and says, well, how do you think it might have happened? And then Dawkins is happy. Well, it could have happened like this. And this is circular reasoning. Long ago in a galaxy far, far away, and I'm kind of saying this tongue-in-cheek, there was a race of extraterrestrials who rose to some advanced civilization by some sort of Darwinian process, and then created life, and then seeded it through the galaxy, and it landed here, and voila, here we are. It's, in my opinion, it's intellectually bankrupt and it's circular reasoning, because where did that race come from? And of course, we don't know. The bottom line is the coding, the DNA, the deoxyribonucleic double helix of life, the building blocks of all life. It seems like there's somebody that created that, because it's way too complex. The co-discoverer of DNA, Watson and Crick. Crick was a vexed man. Watson and Crick discovered it, okay? It was always there. It's kind of like Columbus discovering America. Hi, I'm here. I discovered America. No, you didn't, Columbus. There's about 3 million people living here, but I digress. So with Watson and Crick, Crick was a vexed man, because he knew that, and I'm quoting here, that no matter how many billions of years of prebiotic sop, it would be impossible to form by chance, just by random chance, just one strand of protein. Just give me that. And of course you can't do it. So then, like Dawkins, they start looking, well, somebody made this stuff. It had to come from somewhere. And of course, no one knows. And if we're intellectually honest, I don't know either. I can believe in my what I'll call mythos, because unless you believe in it, it's mythos to somebody else. But I believe in a creator God who's benevolent, and I think somehow he spoke this stuff into existence. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But it's just as valid as a statement or a valid a position as Dawkins, who doesn't know either. So he makes something up. You get where I'm going with this? The bottom line is the DNA is absolutely profound, absolutely profound. And you would think that just the preliminary DNA testing that we've been able to look at in the elongated skulls that we've seen and photographed, the baby mummy skull that we unwrapped, and we showed that in Watchers 7 and Watchers 8. That's,
that's pretty incredible. Have you gotten any DNA samples from it? Maybe not tested, but any samples?
We are ready to go down. Everything is in plastic bags in the museum. Once we get permission, that's the first thing we do. The first thing we do. We are chomping at the bit. I mean, the fact that we got there and got to unwrap, and we did it with Joe Taylor, who's the curator at the Mount Blanco Museum, and then Aaron Junkins, who was our archaeologist for that trip, and Aaron assisted. And Joe basically spent about 4 or 5 hours unwrapping this thing. And I've actually got a poster of it in the other room here. I blew it up. It is just profound. We took that thing out and we handed it to Senior Juan, and he's holding this thing in the daylight. It's a greatly elongated skull. And we had dentition. The dentist came in and said it's about 18 months. And I mean, it had strawberry blonde hair. What are we looking at? You would think, I mean, how many people get to do that, first of all? Because it's a private museum, we were allowed to do it. It's all on film. It's in Watchers 8. I mean, that in itself, if you're at all interested, is the price of admission. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I mean,
no kidding.
I just sat there with my jaw on the ground looking at this thing going, okay, now I'm supposed to believe that this thing was cradle headboarded. I'm not buying it for a stinking minute. And I'm not. Some of the skulls are cradle headboarded. We get that. But we believe, and this is what, again, I'm being politically correct on your show. I'm deliberately holding back.
This is like not a politically correct show.
Well, but that's when I'm doing it. Trust me. What we can agree on is that there's an outside agency that's manipulating the genome. And I think you'll agree with me. There's an outside agency.
I think that an outside agency has been manipulating the genome on this planet since day one.
And I agree. See, so we agree. The only way we disagree is who these intruders or entities are. That's it.
Well, no, I don't even think that we disagree so much on that. My only contention is that I don't think the Nephilim were the byproduct. I think that they were an entity unto themselves, and that there was this hybrid race that was created. Because I'll share my favorite parallel story that I find to the Genesis 6 story. In the Ramayana, they talk about the Vinara, which were a race of, and I'm putting this in quotes, ape men. And the Vinara were created because Vishnu told all of the gods to go down to the earth and have sex with the apes and bears, or monkeys and bears on the planet, to create a race of superhumans to help Rama build the bridge and fight the demon god Lanka. And the demon god Lanka was a giant. So I love that story because it totally validates the Genesis story, which was what floats my personal boat, is finding those parallel stories.
And there's a definite similarity in these ancient texts. I concur. The only reason why I hold to the Genesis 6 account is because of the biblical prophetic thread that goes from Genesis to Revelation. It seems, and I think it's fair to say, it seems that whoever this agency is, that somehow is able to, a priori, tell you what's going to happen on such and such a date. And I'll just give you one. Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel's a prophet found in the Old Testament in the Tanakh 2,500 years ago. The prophecies of Ezekiel 38 and 39, I think this will be, your listeners might find this fascinating. I know I do. But about 2,500 years ago, Ezekiel writes this prophecy, and it says, in the latter days, I will gather you, talking about Israel, from the four corners of the earth and reestablish you in your ancient homeland. and you will inhabit the waste cities. I mean, if you haven't read that, read Ezekiel 38. It's a very startling prophetic passage. And we know that Israel was cast out to the nations from AD 70 till 1948, although the trickle began in the latter part of the 19th century. The Jews began to come back to the land, and that was always the hope. And of course, after World War II, there was a great influx. What's interesting is it says, in the last days, I will gather you from the four corners of the earth and reestablish you in your ancient homeland. That's bizarre. And yet it happened. And the fact that it's the only nation like that is basically, kicked out of their ancient homeland, lost the language until modernity, when Hebrew was then once again reinstated. I mean, it's just a profound story. In my opinion, it's miraculous. But then it says, and this is what brings us right to the present day. It says that I will bring these nations against you. And the lead one is Gog, which we believe is Russia. Now, we all know what's going on. At least most of us know what's going on in the Middle East right now. And that's a 3-hour conversation. But the bottom line is Russia is in the Middle East, poised in Syria, Israel's back door, northeast door. Unprecedented. For those of us who know about the biblical prophetic narrative, we are astonished at what we see. Coupled with that is another ancient prophetic text from the book of Isaiah. Again, ancient prophet, 2,500 years ago, wrote this prophecy. Damascus has become a ruinous heap. Now, Damascus is the oldest city that's been inhabited on this planet. And now, and I've got drone footage, which I posted on my blog several weeks ago, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, which the Russians sent up some drones, like the GoPro drones that we all use now. And this thing flew around Damascus. As far as the eye can see, it's a ruinous heap. Now, there's a news media blackout in this country. It's very difficult to find any images. We don't talk about it. They don't show the American public anything. What we find interesting, and we're trying to vet it, is all of Damascus like this, or a portion of it? Is it continually being, block by block by block? I've never seen, it was destruction as far as the eye could see, literally a ruinous heap. So we look at the biblical prophetic thread from Genesis to Revelation, and that is just one reason, it's a good reason, why I follow very closely to that prophetic thread, because it seems like these things have happened over and over and over and over again. What's written will come to pass. What was foretold will unfold, and that's what we see happening.
Well, and I'm looking at the clock. We have 4 minutes, and we're going to come back to kind of this biblical prophecy on the other side of the break. All right, let me, I'm like going, no, I want to ask this question, but we don't have that much time. The flood. Do you think the flood was to eliminate humanity? Do you think the flood was designed to eliminate these giants or everybody?
Let me answer that.
In 2 minutes or less.
Yeah, I can't. Impossible. And I'm going to whet your listeners' appetites for the other side of the break here. There's a very cryptic passage of prophecy which states this: the coming of the Son of Man will be like the days of Noah. Let me turn it around. It'll be like the days of Noah when the Son of Man returns. What the heck does that mean? And why should we pay attention to it? Something happened in the days of Noah that's unprecedented. And something, again, is about to happen here. And I believe, and I've written about this, it ties in with the implants, that these intruders have invested so much time and so much energy in. It also ties back into the biblical prophetic narrative, specifically and I know most of your listeners know about this, so I'll just tip my hand, and then we'll tie it all together on the other side of the break. Specifically, the so-called mark of the beast, which I'm sure most of your listeners have heard. And that prophecy is...
Sorry, it needs like scary music to it. Well, I'm going to ask kind of like an off-the-cuff question. Okay, so you were talking about Roger Lear, who I love to death, and the alien implants, but now we're going around giving ourselves implants. So do you think that there is this whole conspiracy between the government and the extraterrestrials, and, you know, they're pushing our government to bring through these changes?
I think that what is about to happen on this planet is absolutely unprecedented. And I don't want to give away the punchline until I have time to set it up. But the short answer to that is yes. And I'll tell you what I think. And this is based on 25 years of research.
Oh, but I guess we have to wait for the break.
Bada
Okay.
bing.
Oh, well, there's the music. Yay! I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're here talking to L.A. Marzulli about his book, On the Trail of the Nephilim. We're going to come back and talk about end of days and biblical prophecies after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.